Rachel Henderson never imagined her life could unravel in a single afternoon. She'd hoped for a peaceful pregnancy, a warm home, and a devoted husband by her side. Instead, everything twisted the moment she found out about Angelica, the alluring, sharp-tongued mistress who had waltzed into Rachel's marriage and made herself comfortable. Tension crackled through the mansion's corridors, where echoes of whispers spoke of betrayal, heartbreak, and empty promises. But in the most unexpected moment, right when Angelica cruelly mocked the marks of motherhood etched on Rachel's belly, a sudden movement from the baby changed everything. And as the front door slammed, a millionaire entered, setting off a chain of events no one would ever forget. Rachel Henderson grew up in a small community on the outskirts of Cambridge, Massachusetts. She was the only daughter of Ethan and Marjorie Carmichael, owners of the modest but beloved Carmichael's bookstore. The warm, wood-paneled shop was known for its labyrinth of shelves, filled with everything from antique volumes to the latest bestsellers. As a child, Rachel spent hours curled in a corner, losing herself in adventures depicted by her favorite authors, dreaming of a life where she could share magical moments with someone she truly loved. At 22, fresh out of university, Rachel fell head over heels in love with Jeremy Henderson. Jeremy, a sharp investor with a well-heeled family background, had risen through the corporate world with unusual speed. He possessed unshakable confidence, an infectious laugh, and a knack for reading market trends that could make him fortunes overnight. Before she knew it, Rachel was swept off her feet in a whirlwind romance that ignited her hopes and dreams. Like the characters in her favorite novels, she yearned for a fairy tale ending, complete with a loving husband, a home filled with laughter, and children who would run barefoot through sun-drenched gardens. Rachel and Jeremy's wedding was every bit as grand as one might expect from a rising millionaire in the investment world. Chandeliers glittered in the ornate hall they had rented in downtown Boston. Family and friends marveled at the expansive buffet, the fine wines, the live quartet playing exquisite music. Rachel wore a lace-trimmed gown that accentuated her slim figure, and Jeremy was resplendent in an impeccable tuxedo. They exchanged vows in front of hundreds of guests, sealing their future in a glimmer of lights and applause. Yet as the years trickled by, life unfolded in a way that resembled less a fairy tale and more a complicated tapestry of illusions. Jeremy's business expansions soared. With each new project, he gained more wealth, new contacts, and unprecedented influence. He traveled more frequently, returning home drained, often with the stale smell of whiskey on his breath. Rachel, meanwhile, found herself more isolated in their enormous house, filled with luxurious furniture, but devoid of real warmth. The corridors reverberated with emptiness as Rachel's footsteps echoed from one lavish room to the next. When Rachel realized she was pregnant, she dared to hope that this blessing would mend the cracks in her marriage. She told Jeremy one evening in their grand living room, as the city lights sparkled beyond tall windows. His reaction was guarded. For a brief moment, his eyes lit up with joy and astonishment, but it was followed quickly by a sobering, pensive expression. He simply said, "That's wonderful news, Rachel," before turning away to check emails on his phone. Despite his ambivalence, Rachel decided to be hopeful, certain that fatherhood would soften Jeremy's edges. Little did she know that in the shadows of their extravagant life, Angelica Morales, a stunning marketing consultant with fox-like cunning, was already inching her way into Jeremy's sphere. Angelica Morales was everything that turned heads at corporate events. Tall, poised, and dressed in impeccable designer suits, she exuded a confidence that enticed both men and women alike. Though her background was a mystery, rumors swirled that she had been raised in a modest home in Bogotá, Colombia, and had moved to the US to pursue a better life. Some whispered she came from a wealthy family that lost everything inspiring her unwavering ambition. Others suspected her successes relied more on strategic liaisons than genuine hard work. Regardless of the truth, Angelica found her way into the hearts and pockets of numerous influential people. She specialized in PR damage control for large companies, including Henderson Industries, Jeremy's growing firm. She handled the brand's image-curated public perception and occasionally planned lavish events for corporate clients. By the time Rachel was 6 months pregnant, Angelica was seemingly a fixture at Jeremy's side. Photos of Jeremy and Angelica laughing at private dinners, leaning into each other at charity galas, and enjoying each other's company at conferences popped up in tabloids. Rachel had dismissed the rumors at first. She rationalized that Jeremy simply spent long hours with Angelica due to work. But soon, she began to notice the nearly imperceptible signals, the slightly too familiar banter between them, the glimmer in Angelica's eyes when she mentioned Jeremy's name, and that nauseating feeling creeping up Rachel's spine whenever the phone would ring in the late evenings. "Everything okay?" Rachel asked Jeremy softly one night as he lay in bed beside her, texting away. "It's just Angelica," he replied, barely looking up. "She needs some details for tomorrow's product launch." That was it, the end of the conversation. But the seed of doubt was planted. Late at night, when Jeremy slept, Rachel stared at the ornate ceiling fan rotating above them, each turn of the blades echoing her thoughts. Is he cheating on me? Would he do that while I'm pregnant? Despite her suspicions, Rachel remained determined to think the best of her husband. As her belly grew, she busied herself by reading about pregnancy nutrition, gentle exercise routines, and ways to prepare for motherhood. She confided in her best friend, Jessica Carmichael, her cousin actually, but they were as close as sisters who swore to support her no matter what. Jessica lived nearby and would stop by the Henderson mansion with fresh fruit, warm smiles, and reassurance. "Rach, you're glowing," Jessica insisted as they stood by the massive kitchen island. "Any moment now, and you'll see everything change for the better. Babies have a way of recentering everything." Rachel nodded, stroking the curve of her belly. "I hope so. Sometimes I think Jeremy's heart is in the right place, but all this business is pulling him away." Jessica did not reply. She merely offered a smile that looked as uncertain as Rachel's hope. In the hush of the marble-tiled kitchen, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, accompanied by the quiet tension that threatened to snap with the slightest pressure. An unexpected moment of clarity arrived when Rachel discovered a text message on Jeremy's phone. It was late. Jeremy had collapsed into bed after a round of drinks with business partners. His phone lit up on the nightstand, revealing Angelica's name. Curiosity battled with guilt, but ultimately, Rachel swiped the screen open. Angelica, 11:47 p.m. "I miss your arms around me. Are you coming over tonight?" Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The words glowed like a neon sign, an undeniable truth. A swirl of anger and heartbreak coursed through her, nearly making her lose her balance. She exhaled, locked the phone, and carefully returned it to the nightstand. Exhausted tears stung her eyes as she curled herself on the far edge of the bed, her baby bump a reminder of the life that was stirring within her, while her husband pursued another woman. The next day, determined to confront the situation, head on, Rachel mustered the courage to approach Jeremy. He had woken early to dress for a high-profile meeting. Standing in the doorway of his massive closet, Rachel's voice trembled. "Jeremy, we need to talk." He glanced at her in the mirror, fiddling with his silk tie. "Sure. After my meeting, okay?" Her frustration flared. "No, I can't wait. I know about Angelica. Don't deny it. I saw her message last night on your phone." Jeremy's hands froze around the tie knot. He turned slowly, his face caught between shock and defensiveness. "Rachel, it's not what you think. So you're telling me that she's not asking if you're coming over tonight?" Her voice cracked. "I'm not a fool, Jeremy. You're sleeping with her." His expression hardened, shame flickering across his features. "Rachel, Yes, we've been seeing each other. I'm sorry. It started as something casual, and I thought it wouldn't mean anything. But then it got out of hand." He bit his lip. "Look, you're pregnant, and this baby wasn't planned for me right now." Each word slammed into Rachel's chest like a blow. Anger, betrayal, and heartbreak surged within her, swirling into an unbearable storm. Tears trickled down her cheeks. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to collapse into a sobbing heap. But a calmer, protective instinct took precedence. She laid a hand protectively over her belly. Without another word, she turned and left Jeremy alone in the closet, a stunned expression blanketing his face. Over the following weeks, Rachel withdrew into a fortress of her own making. She avoided Jeremy as much as possible in their vast mansion. When they did cross paths, arguments erupted, often initiated by Jeremy's defensive guilt or Rachel's fiery anguish. But for the baby's sake, she refrained from any drastic decisions. Instead, she confided in her friend Jessica and visited her parents, Ethan and Marjorie, frequently. "If you stay, you must demand respect," Marjorie advised, her voice trembling with emotion and anger for her daughter's pain. "Rachel, I know you love him, but this cannot go on. He must choose." Rachel nodded, tears blurring her vision. She wanted Jeremy to realize his mistake, to end this humiliating affair with Angelica, and to return to her, to the life they had once hoped to build. Life carried on in a surreal haze until one day, Rachel found an invitation in her mailbox for a lavish Henderson Industries event at the Edwardian Hall, an annual corporate gala. The theme was New Beginnings, ironically enough. She stared at the embossed letters, noting that Angelica's name was featured as one of the event coordinators. Her heart sank. There was no escape from this public humiliation. She debated not going at all until her father and mother insisted it was her right as Jeremy's wife. Jessica agreed. "You have every right to be there. Don't let Angelica intimidate you." And so, with her swollen belly nearly 8 months along, Rachel decided to attend to face Angelica and Jeremy, in a public setting perhaps to show them both that she would not be so easily cast aside. Edwardian Hall was adorned with intricate crystal chandeliers, and every corner was swathed in extravagant decor. Tables dressed in fine linens and centerpieces of fresh orchids circled the large dance floor. The air hummed with an undercurrent of wealth and sophistication. Rachel arrived wearing a satin teal gown that skimmed her pregnant belly elegantly. Jessica, in a dark blue cocktail dress, clung protectively to her side. Conversations hushed and eyes turned. Whispers spread among the corporate elite, aware of the rumors surrounding the Henderson marriage. Rachel felt the weight of their scrutiny, but kept her chin high. She had nothing to be ashamed of. Jeremy, who had arrived earlier for preparatory matters, spotted Rachel from across the room. His expression turned uneasy, as though uncertain whether he should greet his wife or pretend he hadn't seen her. Moments later, Angelica glided into view. She wore a figure-hugging, backless black gown, exuding poise with every step. Spotting Rachel, Angelica's gaze flicked with a cruel satisfaction. Jessica whispered in Rachel's ear. "Don't let her get to you." Bracing herself, Rachel walked across the marble floor until she stood in front of Angelica. The hustle and bustle of the gala continued around them in a swirl of color and laughter. Angelica offered a sharp smile. "Rachel, so good to see you. You're glowing." Rachel's voice was calm but laced with steel. "Angelica. Still working closely with my husband, I see." One of Angelica's perfectly sculpted brows arched. "It's part of my job. We have a great synergy, Jeremy and I." Before Rachel could respond, Jeremy joined them, tension bristling in his posture. "Rachel, you look lovely." He made a half-hearted attempt to greet her with a peck on the cheek, but she pulled back. "I see you two have a lot to talk about," Rachel said tersely, glancing at Angelica. "I won't keep you." Sensing the thick atmosphere, Angelica decided to throw a verbal dart. She eyed Rachel's belly with a disdainful smirk. "You're certainly bigger than I remember, and those stretch marks. Well, guess that's the price of motherhood, right? Not everyone can keep everything so pristine." It was a low blow, and an immediate hush fell over the small circle of people nearby, who overheard. Even Jeremy looked aghast. Angelica's sly grin deepened. Rachel's cheeks burned with both shame and fury. In that moment, her protective instincts roared. She placed a trembling hand over her belly, fighting back tears. "This is what you do. Mock a pregnant wife for the marks that come with bringing life into the world." But before she could lash out or storm away, something happened that shifted everyone's attention. The baby kicked hard, so strong it reverberated through Rachel's abdomen, visible even through the silky fabric of her gown. A hush fell upon the group, as for a brief moment, the miracle of life overshadowed the cruelty of the moment. Jeremy's gaze locked onto that distinct movement, his breath catching. It was the first time he had witnessed such a pronounced kick. For an instant, the tension between him and Rachel was eclipsed by awe. The baby, their child, was real and calling out for attention. Rachel exhaled, tears brimming at the corners of her eyes. Angelica's smug expression faltered. The perfection of that moment, mother and unborn child in an undeniable bond, highlighted the ugliness of Angelica's taunt. The crowd that had formed around them slowly dispersed, sensing they had witnessed something raw and personal. Jeremy, struggling with conflicting emotions, gently touched Rachel's shoulder. Is everything okay? Do you need to sit?" Rachel nodded, blinking back tears. She let herself be guided away by Jessica and Jeremy, leaving Angelica behind with a scowl. Jessica led Rachel to a plush chair in a quieter corner of the gala hall. "You all right?" Jessica asked, kneeling beside her. Rachel nodded numbly, placing both hands on her belly. The baby kicked again, gentler this time, as though reassuring its mother. "I'm fine," she whispered, though the heartbreak in her eyes said otherwise. Jeremy knelt as well, his eyes flickering with concern. "Rachel, Angelica shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry." Rachel glanced at him, exhaustion heavy in her gaze. The fact that she felt bold enough to say that in public. "It just shows where your loyalty is, Jeremy." He dropped his head, unable to deny the truth. For all his wealth and success, Jeremy Henderson was a broken man. The veneer of confidence peeled away to reveal a swirl of regret and confusion. Rachel forced herself to stand, ignoring Jeremy's attempts to help her. "I'm going home," she declared, her voice cracking. "Stay here if you want. This is your world now." She left with Jessica swiftly following. Jeremy remained behind, torn between his guilt and the demands of the event he had to host. The incident at the gala set off a ripple of gossip throughout Boston's upper crust. Rumors circulated about a public confrontation, with some proclaiming that Angelica was now the real power behind the throne. Others whispered about Rachel's heartbreak and the unborn child caught in the crossfire. Through it all, Rachel found solace in only a few confidants, Jessica, her parents, and a small circle of old friends who hadn't been dazzled or intimidated by Jeremy's fortune. Meanwhile, Jeremy tried to salvage his marriage in fits and starts. He broke off communication with Angelica for a short while, but soon the demands of Henderson Industries' marketing campaigns forced them into contact again. Worse, Angelica leveraged her professional advantage. She threatened to reveal internal company secrets if Jeremy cut her off completely. She dangled damning knowledge about the firm's upcoming merger with Redcliffe & Sons, a high-stakes deal that Jeremy had slaved over for months. If Angelica leaked the sensitive data, the ramifications would be catastrophic for Henderson Industries, risking Jeremy's entire fortune. Caught in the vice grip of blackmail and uncertain desire, Jeremy vacillated between saving his company and saving his marriage. He grew quiet, subdued, and drank more heavily than before. By the time Rachel was 2 weeks away from her due date, she could hardly recognize the man she once loved. One stormy night, the tension broke. Sheets of rain lashed the windows of the Henderson mansion as thunder rumbled in the distance. Rachel could not sleep, her baby belly, unwieldy, her heart weighed down by stress. She padded to the kitchen to make a cup of tea. As the kettle whistled softly, she heard the front door swing open. Jeremy stumbled in, drenched from head to toe, eyes bloodshot. "Where have you been?" she asked warily, though a piece of her still cared. "Out," he muttered, slurring the word slightly. She moved to help him, but he shook her off. "I don't need your pity, Rachel." Exasperated, she threw up her hands. "It's not pity. You're my husband and you're drunk. You're soaking wet. You'll catch a cold." He shrugged. "So what if I do?" "Doesn't seem to matter anymore." In that moment, a fierce protectiveness seized Rachel. "Look at you. Jeremy, you have a child on the way. You have responsibilities. You think wallowing in self-pity will fix any of this. You have to choose me and this baby, or Angelica and her manipulations." She expected him to snap back to rage, that she was giving ultimatums. Instead, Jeremy sank down onto the hallway bench, burying his face in his hands. The anger that had simmered in his eyes collapsed into remorse. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating his pain. "Rachel," he said in a broken whisper, "I'm sorry. I messed up. And now I'm trapped. Angelica has threatened to ruin me. Ruin Henderson Industries. She's got documents, knowledge. She demands money, but even that might not be enough for her. I need time or a plan something. I don't know if it's too late for us." She sighed, kneeling by him, despite the discomfort in her late-stage pregnancy. "I can't fix your mistakes for you," she whispered, "but for the sake of our child, we can try together if you choose to break away from her for good." He looked up, tears swimming in his eyes, and nodded slowly. "I want to. I'll figure out how to handle her. I promise." The next day, Jeremy set about retrieving copies of the sensitive documents Angelica had. He discovered that during her time at Henderson Industries, she had quietly built a personal archive of the firm's internal memos, business plans, and email chains referencing the Redcliffe & Sons merger. She had everything stashed away, presumably to use as leverage. With the help of a loyal IT specialist named Thomas Gray, Jeremy, tried to trace the data's footprints in the company servers. Thomas had once confided in Jeremy about Angelica's suspicious attempts to access restricted files. Though initially dismissed, the warnings made sense now. Over a tense 72-hour period, Thomas worked meticulously, recovering partial backups and scrubbing metadata. Together they discovered that while Angelica did indeed have access to damaging information, she'd also left a trail of unethical acts, falsified invoices, phantom marketing charges, and embezzlement attempts. If Angelica planned to leak anything, Jeremy could counter with evidence of her own illegal maneuvers. Still, the outcome hinged on a precarious gamble. Jeremy needed a confrontation that would put Angelica in checkmate without risking the downfall of Henderson Industries. He needed to be sure she wouldn't sabotage him in a final vengeful act. On a crisp morning, Jeremy scheduled a meeting with Angelica at a discreet corner table in the Grand Horizon Hotel's cafe. He arrived early. The overhead chandelier cast winking reflections in the polished marble floors, and an unsettling quiet hovered among the plush chairs and well-dressed patrons. When Angelica swept in wearing a belted red trench coat, her expression was icy. "You've been busy," she said. Her voice clipped. Jeremy motioned for her to sit. "I have." She leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "I hope for your sake it's not something that's going to make me angry." Jeremy slid a folder across the table. "Go ahead. Look." Angelica opened it to find page after page of incriminating records, her unauthorized account activity. Suspicious funds, all carefully compiled and annotated. Her lips pressed into a thin line. If Jeremy chose to bring these to the authorities, Angelica would face serious charges. "You're bluffing," she hissed, but a flicker of fear laced her voice. "No," Jeremy said calmly. "I've already made copies in case anything happens. So here's the deal. We both know you've got data on Henderson Industries. If you use it against me, I'll use this. And you'll go down first." Angelica's knuckles turned white around the folder. "You think you can threaten me like this? After everything we've been through?" Jeremy leaned back in his chair, a pained look crossing his face. "Whatever happened between us, whatever I let happen, it's over, Angelica. I can't deny my part in this mess, but I'm done letting you manipulate me. I want to save my marriage. I want to be a father to my child. And if you have any sense left, you'll back off." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she recognized the checkmate. With a huff, she snapped the folder shut. "You'll regret this, Jeremy," she spat, turning on her heels and stalking out of the cafe. He watched her go, a swirl of relief and apprehension coiling in his chest. He had taken a step, one that might finally free him. That same evening, while Jeremy was driving home from the Grand Horizon Hotel, Rachel found herself alone in the mansion. She had insisted on independence, but the due date was imminent. With Jeremy's phone turned off during the meeting, she had no way to reach him. Worse yet, a series of strong contractions began to roll through her belly. At first, she tried to remain calm. She'd experienced Braxton Hicks contractions before, but something about these was sharper, more persistent. Pain rippled through her back, and she found herself doubling over by the couch, trying not to panic. She thought about calling Jessica for help, but the phone slipped out of her trembling hand and clattered to the floor. Another contraction seized her more intense. She let out a ragged gasp, struggling to breathe through it. Suddenly a warm gush of fluid soaked her dress. Her water had broken. "All right," she whispered to herself, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. "Breathe, Rachel. Don't panic." She grabbed her phone from the floor, tears of pain and fear streaking her face. She dialed 911, voice quavering as she explained she was in labor and alone at her home. The operator assured her that an ambulance was on the way. She tried Jeremy's number next, still no answer. She managed to phone Jessica, who rushed over instantly. Everything became a haze of bright lights and blaring sirens. The paramedics guided Rachel onto a stretcher, hooking her to monitors and an IV. Jessica held her hand, whispering words of encouragement. Through the mansion's windows, Rachel caught a glimpse of the black night sky dotted with stars, and in her pain, she prayed for strength. When Jeremy finally turned his phone back on, he saw a barrage of missed calls, voicemails, and texts from Jessica, and from an unknown emergency number. His heart slammed in his chest. "Rachel, something's happened." He floored the accelerator, weaving through traffic with reckless speed. Rain had started to fall, slickening the roads. As he made his way to St. Joseph's Medical Center, every moment stretched taut with dread. He barely registered the city lights whizzing by. At last he parked haphazardly outside the emergency entrance, ignoring the protests of hospital security. He rushed into the bright, fluorescent corridors, scanning the signage for maternity. Finally, he found the ward and saw Jessica pacing near a vending machine. Her eyes were red-rimmed tears stained her cheeks. "Where were you?" she snapped, though relief shone in her eyes that he had arrived at all. "I'm sorry. Is Rachel okay?" "What's happening?" Jessica exhaled shakily. Her water broke at home, and she was having intense contractions. She's in the delivery room now. There were some complications, something about her blood pressure. They said to prepare for anything. Jeremy swallowed hard. "I need to see her." He burst into the delivery suite. Doctors and nurses surrounded Rachel, who lay, sweating eyes pinched shut in pain. Machines beeped, measuring her vital signs and the baby's heart rate. A swirl of medical jargon passed among the staff. A doctor in scrubs turned to Jeremy. "Sir, you can't just barge in here." "Are you the father?" "Yes," Jeremy gasped. "Let me be with my wife." Rachel opened her eyes, tears swimming. She reached for his hand. "Jeremy," she panted. "Thank God you're here." He squeezed her hand, guilty relief flooding through him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm here now. I promise I'm not leaving your side." She managed a nod, focusing on the wave of pain ripping through her. Nurses coached her breathing, and the doctor explained that if things didn't progress swiftly, they might have to do an emergency C-section. Rachel, trembling with fear, clung to Jeremy's arm. He murmured words of reassurance, wiping her brow with a cool cloth. Time blurred in that delivery room. Rachel gasped and cried out, pushing through waves of agony. Jeremy stood by, helpless but determined, offering encouragement. Another contraction seized Rachel, and she bore down, guided by the doctor's calm directives. "Keep going," the nurse urged. "You're almost there." In a final surge of effort, Rachel let out a guttural cry. Then suddenly the air was split by a high-pitched wail, tiny, fragile, and so alive. The nurse lifted a small, squirming infant, the baby's cry echoing through the room like a triumphal fanfare. Rachel collapsed back against the bed, sobbing with relief and overwhelming love. Jeremy's eyes brimmed with tears as he stared at the tiny person they had created their daughter, whose face was scrunched up, protesting this new world. "You have a beautiful baby girl," the nurse announced, placing the infant gently on Rachel's chest. Tremors of emotion coursed through Rachel as she wrapped her arms around the newborn. feeling the warm, delicate weight against her skin. Jeremy kissed the top of Rachel's head, tears streaming freely down his face. In that moment, everything else faded. The betrayal, the humiliations, the blackmail. All that mattered was this child, fragile and perfect, a symbol of love, despite the darkness that had threatened to tear them apart. Jessica peeked into the room, eyes shining with tears of joy. "She's beautiful," she whispered, lips quivering. Rachel lifted the newborn so Jessica could see her face. "She's perfect," Rachel murmured, looking into Jeremy's eyes. "We did this." He nodded, his voice choking with emotion. "Yeah," he breathed. "We sure did." For the next few days, Rachel and the baby, whom they named Charlotte, rested in the hospital under the watchful care of the medical staff. Jeremy remained at Rachel's side, as much as possible, stepping away, only to confirm to his business associates that the baby had arrived safely and that he would be taking a leave. To his surprise, many colleagues congratulated him, praising his new fatherhood. Even some corporate rivals softened at the news regardless of cutthroat competition. New life has a way of melting hardened exteriors. As for Angelica, she disappeared from public view. Jeremy's final confrontation had led her to resign from Henderson Industries abruptly. Few noticed her exit, aside from a handful of employees who whispered about corporate politics. Freed from her looming threat, Jeremy felt an enormous weight lifted. Yet the shame of his affair and the way he had hurt Rachel remained as an ache he had to reckon with each day. On the day Rachel and Charlotte were discharged from the hospital, Jeremy helped them into the car. He hesitated before turning the key. "Rachel," he started, voice faltering, "I don't deserve another chance, but I promise you I will do everything in my power to be worthy of you and Charlotte. I've ended it with Angelica, and if I can fix things, I will. I'm begging you for a chance." Rachel looked down at Charlotte's sleeping form, the baby snug in her car seat. Tears glazed Rachel's eyes as she met Jeremy's gaze. "I can't forget what you did, but for Charlotte's sake and for the love we once shared, I'm willing to see if we can rebuild. I need you to be honest, loyal, and present. No more secrets." He nodded, placing his hand gently atop hers. No more secrets. Returning to the Henderson mansion felt surreal for Rachel. The opulent hallways that once seemed cold and unwelcoming now held the patter of new life. Charlotte's tiny coos and cries echoed off the marble floors and high ceilings, reminding them daily of the miracle that had pierced their darkest hours. Jeremy joined Rachel in nightly feedings, learning how to change diapers, rock Charlotte to sleep, and help Rachel recover. Though it was awkward, he had missed every parenting class, never studied an ounce of fatherhood. He found surprising joy in the simple tasks. Each squeak and gurgle from Charlotte felt like a small victory, a testament to life continuing forward. Meanwhile, Jeremy also sought counseling to address his guilt and to work on the marriage. Rachel agreed to couples therapy, though she was skeptical at first. She wanted to see if Jeremy's transformation was genuine or merely another phase that would dissolve the moment business pressures mounted. Yet, session by session, Rachel observed something shift in Jeremy. He opened up about his craving for external validation, how success had become an addiction, and how his father's stern demeanor had left him perpetually hungry for approval. He spoke of the excitement Angelica had provided, fueling his ego, when he felt overshadowed by fatherhood's responsibilities. Rachel, in turn, shared her feelings of abandonment, her terror at discovering his affair, and her deep-seated insecurities about her own body changing during pregnancy. Each revelation peeled back layers of resentment, revealing raw vulnerabilities. Painful as it was, it offered a path toward healing if they were both willing to walk it. One evening, after Charlotte had drifted off to sleep, Rachel and Jeremy sat in the living room. The fire crackled in the ornate fireplace, the flames dancing across their faces. Rachel sipped a mug of chamomile tea. Distant. "I want to ask you something," she said quietly, setting her mug down. "Do you regret having Charlotte with me?" He looked startled, shaking his head emphatically. "No, God, no. She's the best thing that's happened to me. She makes me want to be better." Rachel pressed her lips together. "During the pregnancy, you acted like you wanted to escape. You turned to Angelica even though I was here. I needed you." A tear slipped down Jeremy's cheek. "I know. I was a fool. My priorities were skewed. I was terrified of fatherhood, of losing my freedom, my success. I was selfish, Rachel." She inhaled shakily, pushing herself to continue. "I can forgive you only if I believe you're truly committed to changing. I've seen hints of it, but I need to see consistency. Because if this happens again, I will walk away. Charlotte deserves a father who doesn't betray her mother." He reached for her hand, gently interlacing his fingers with hers. "You have my word. Every day I will prove that you and Charlotte come first." Silence fell thick with a mixture of sorrow and promise. The fire's glow flickered on the walls, and somewhere above Charlotte stirred. In that moment, with tears shining in both their eyes, they embraced a fragile hope that they could rebuild what had been shattered. Over the next few months, Jeremy scaled back his relentless workload. He delegated tasks at Henderson Industries, trusting a management team to handle day-to-day operations. He spent more time at home, learning the rhythms of parenthood. Rachel watched him steadily, warily, but she could not deny that Jeremy showed genuine dedication. He woke for 2 a.m. feedings, found ways to calm Charlotte when she was fussy, and left a single rose on Rachel's nightstand in the mornings, apologizing anew for all the pain he had caused. Rachel, for her part, alternated between cautious optimism and emotional exhaustion. She recognized that healing from betrayal was neither linear nor simple. Some days, she glimpsed Jeremy's sincerity and felt a surge of love for him, like an ember that refused to die out. Other days, she was haunted by memories of his infidelity, her trust cracking all over again. They continued therapy sessions. One day, the therapist suggested they renew their vows in a private ceremony, not as a cure-all, but as a step to cement their efforts to start fresh. Rachel hesitated, uncertain if she was ready for such a step. Jeremy, however, embraced the idea, seeing it as a symbol of rebirth. He told Rachel he would only proceed if she felt it was right. Time indeed slowly bound up the wounds. More laughter filled the house. The staff, who had quietly witnessed the couple's turmoil, began to breathe easier, seeing genuine warmth return to the Henderson household. Angelica Morales was not used to losing. For weeks after Jeremy's final rejection, she isolated herself in a high-rise penthouse in downtown Boston. Gone were the designer parties, the invitations to speak on panels, and the whispered admiration in elite business circles. The same people who once clung to her now avoided her name like a stain on silk. She paced her marble floors with bare feet, wineglass in hand, rereading the last messages she had ever sent Jeremy. They were short, desperate, unanswered. How had it come to this? She replayed their months together like scenes from a shattered film reel, the glamorous dinners, stolen kisses, lavish gifts. She had convinced herself that Rachel, soft-spoken and predictable, would eventually be forgotten, that motherhood would wear her down, make her invisible, that Jeremy's hunger for power and beauty would win out. But it hadn't. He chose Rachel. Worse, he had outmaneuvered her. With one calculated confrontation, Jeremy had neutralized her leverage. The confidential documents she'd threatened to release, now overshadowed by the evidence he had compiled against her, forged invoices, unauthorized fund transfers, her digital fingerprints over every misstep. Her reputation was beyond repair. Still, Angelica wasn't one to disappear quietly. She had one final move. A bitter encore. She gathered a folder of old photos, grainy, intimate snapshots of her and Jeremy together. Some at private dinners, some from hotel rooms, timed selfies she had kept as insurance. She added flirty texts, half-formed threats, and even doctored screenshots to heighten the drama. Her plan was clear: leak the material anonymously to online tabloids and trigger a new wave of scandal. Just enough to embarrass him, to make Rachel question her decision to forgive. And she did. For a moment, it worked, but only for a moment. The internet barely flinched. The story had passed its expiration date. Public sympathy had long since shifted to Rachel, the wife who had stood through the storm and emerged stronger. The mother of Jeremy's child. The woman who bore her stretch marks with pride, not shame. Angelica's final card landed with a dull thud. A few gossip blogs reposted the images, but even their comment sections were indifferent. Old news. Wasn't she the one who mocked the pregnant wife? Why is she still trying? She watched from behind dark sunglasses as her name dissolved into the noise, facing possible defamation charges and industry blacklisting. Angelica packed a few designer bags and booked a one-way flight. No press release, no public farewell. Just a whispered curse and the fading sting of a power she no longer held. She vanished into obscurity, not with a bang, but with silence. And Rachel never spoke her name again. 6 months had passed since Charlotte's birth, and with every sunrise the world felt a little softer. Rachel stood barefoot in the kitchen of the Henderson mansion, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug of tea. Morning light spilled through the wide windows, casting golden beams across the tiled floor. In the living room, she could hear the soft giggles of Charlotte, now a rosy-cheeked infant who had learned to sit up and delight in the crinkling sound of newspaper pages. Jeremy was on the floor with her, making silly faces and sound effects that filled the house with a joy Rachel hadn't heard in a long time. For a moment she simply watched. No words, no judgment. Just quiet gratitude. This was not the life she had expected when she first walked down the aisle in a jeweled gown. It wasn't the version filled with gala events, champagne toasts and whispered affections over candlelit dinners. No, it was messier, more fragile, more real. And it was hers. Jeremy looked up and caught her gaze, giving her a small, hopeful smile. "She's trying to eat the business section," he said with a chuckle. "She has good instincts," Rachel replied dryly. "Start with the real disasters first." He laughed, and the sound surprised her. Not because she hadn't heard it before, but because this time it felt genuine, grounded, like it came from someone no longer performing, no longer hiding. Later that day, as Charlotte napped in her crib, Jeremy approached Rachel on the back patio. He'd been quieter lately, more careful with his words, always checking her cues. Not to avoid conflict, but to respect the space she still needed. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe the three of us could get away. Just for a bit. Somewhere coastal. Quiet. No phones, no meetings." Rachel turned to him, surprised. "I want to see you smile without distractions," he added. "Just us and the sea." She considered it. The old version of her would have hesitated, unsure of his motives. But this Jeremy. He had shown up day after day, diaper after diaper, therapy session after therapy session. He hadn't rushed her. He hadn't run. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Let's go somewhere the world can't find us." And they did. A few weeks later, they drove up to the coast of Maine. They rented a small cottage overlooking the rocky shore, its windows open to salt air and crashing waves. Charlotte squealed with delight at the sensation of sand between her toes. At night, they read stories by the fireplace, and Rachel found herself laughing again, really laughing. They didn't talk much about the past. They didn't need to. The wind carried it away one breath at a time. This wasn't a grand second chance. It was a quiet one. And sometimes, those are the ones that last. It was the first day of spring when Rachel finally said yes. Not to a question of love, because love had never been the issue, but to the idea of ceremony of commitment, rediscovered, of a vow once broken, now whispered again with new weight. They chose not a cathedral or ballroom this time, but something smaller, something quieter. A sun-dappled orchard behind her childhood friend Marianne's home in Cambridge, a place where apple blossoms drifted like confetti in the wind, and the ground smelled of new earth and forgiveness. Rachel stood beneath a simple white arbor, draped in wildflowers, her dress flowing and modest, with no attempt to hide the stretch marks or stories her body carried. She wasn't the same woman who had walked down the aisle years ago in a glittering Boston ballroom. She was stronger now, scarred, but unashamed. Jeremy waited for her beneath the blossoms, his suit crisp, but his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. In his hands he held not a diamond-studded ring, but a simple band, handmade by a local artisan. No sparkle, just substance. Their closest friends and family encircled them: Jessica, who had never once wavered; Miranda, holding baby Charlotte on her hip; her parents, tearful, but beaming. The air was still the kind of silence that holds meaning. Jeremy's voice trembled as he took Rachel's hands. "Rachel, I made a vow once before, and I broke it. I broke us. But this time, I don't come with empty promises. I come with lessons learned, and with a heart that finally understands what it means to truly love, to truly stay. I vow to protect you, to choose you, to never again mistake your grace for weakness." Tears shimmered in Rachel's eyes as she replied, her voice unwavering. "Jeremy, life isn't a fairy tale, and we've learned that the hard way. But standing here today, I see the man you've fought to become. I vow to trust you again slowly. I vow to stand beside you not blindly but bravely. And most of all, I vow to protect the family we've built with honesty, with intention, with love." There was no thunderous applause, no grand music. Only the sound of Charlotte's soft coo, the rustle of leaves, and the quiet sniffles of guests who had watched this couple bend without breaking. They slipped the new rings onto each other's fingers and sealed the moment with a kiss, not showy, not staged, but reverent. As they turned to face the people who had held them up, who had watched them fall and rise again, Charlotte clapped in Miranda's arms, her giggle a perfect punctuation to the ceremony. It wasn't a second wedding. It was a renewal of love, of truth, of choice. And in the orchard breeze, surrounded by petals and peace, Jeremy and Rachel began again. The seasons shifted gently, as they always do, ushering in a warm breeze that carried the scent of new beginnings. For Rachel, the pain of betrayal no longer defined her days. It had become a distant echo, softened by time and replaced by something stronger: peace. Her bookstore, Charlotte's Corner, sat nestled between a florist and a family-run bakery on a quiet street in Cambridge. The shop was filled with soft reading chairs, shelves of hand-picked stories, and the laughter of children echoing through the aisles. It wasn't just a business, it was a sanctuary, a dream rebuilt with love, one book at a time. Behind the counter, Rachel thrived. Her days were no longer clouded with worry or doubt. She wore her stretch marks with pride, her daughter perched on her hip, like a symbol of everything she'd fought for. In the eyes of every young mother who walked through the door, she saw reflections of her own journey. Raw, honest, beautiful. At home, Jeremy had transformed in the quietest ways. He never made grand speeches anymore. Instead, he showed up in the early mornings for bottle duty, in the late evenings for story time, and in all the in-between moments that mattered most. He still wore a suit, still held board meetings, but now he also braided Charlotte's hair before preschool and made pancakes shaped like bears on Saturdays. His world had changed shape. It no longer revolved around deals and deadlines, but around a family he had nearly lost. Some scars remained. There were days when Rachel still flinched at shadows from the past, moments when Angelica's mocking words would echo in her mind like a cruel whisper. But then Charlotte would giggle or toddle across the living room, calling Mama, and Rachel would remember she had won. Not just her family back, but her power, her voice, her joy. The gossip had faded. So had Angelica. The headlines that once stung were buried under fresher scandals. What mattered now wasn't what the world had once said, but what they had built in the aftermath. On a quiet evening, as Charlotte lay sleeping and soft music played in the background, Jeremy took Rachel's hand and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us." Rachel smiled gently, her gaze steady. "We earned this, the hard way." They sat together, wrapped in the warmth of forgiveness, of growth, of a love no longer naive, but real. And in the silence, in the soft rhythm of Charlotte's breathing down the hall, there was triumph. Not the loud, cinematic kind, but the kind that lasts. Thank you for witnessing this journey of heartbreak transformation and the extraordinary power of second chances. If Rachel's resilience and Jeremy's redemption moved you, or if baby Charlotte's pure joy tugged at your heartstrings, we invite you to be part of this story's ongoing legacy. A simple gesture like share and subscribe helps bring more stories of hope and renewal to others who might be facing similar crossroads in their lives. Let's spread the message that no matter how dark the moment, faith, honesty, and genuine effort can carve a path toward healing. Join us in celebrating the victories of love and family over fear and betrayal. Together we can remind the world that there is always a chance to correct mistakes and start anew. Thank you again for being with us. Please remember to like, share this video, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories.